Hi, I'm Emily Hargrove and welcome to Prime. I have two very special ladies with me in the studio today. I have Dr. Gail Thomas and Dr. Joanne Stroud, co-founders of the Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture. They are here to talk about, well, have a conversation about the gem that is the Dallas Institute. For 31 years, it has enhanced the city. And so ladies, thank you for being here. I just want to talk to you about everything about the Dallas Institute, and what the two of you have done, as well as the other founders, has been incredible for this city and for beyond. So let's begin. Thank you.
How delightful. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for having us.
So tell me, so let's go right back. 31 years ago, the papers were signed for the Dallas Institute. How did it all come about?
Well, who should tell the story? You can start and I'll fill in.
Actually, the idea came from all of us working together at the University of Dallas. We were all colleagues at the University of Dallas and felt a passion to have conversation with the community, with the city. I had been director of the Center for Civic Leadership, and Louise Cowan wrote that curriculum and had been working back and forth university, city. Joanne was teaching.
I was teaching in the literature department, the very famous literature department of the University of Dallas, where we had the genre courses that Dr. Louise Cowan had instituted, and having a marvelous time teaching. When we started trying to figure out how to bring all the work in the city from the university into actual engagement in the city. And so it was a natural progression.
And James Hillman was with us. We had brought James Hillman, Joanne and I, and Robert Sardello, about 3 years before, had invited James Hillman to join us at the University of Dallas. After, of course, going to Don and Louise Cowan. Don Cowan was president, and Louise was the head of the Institute of Philosophic Studies, where Joanne and I both got our PhDs. And we brought James Hillman to Dallas. He was being courted by universities all over the United States. I could name them all right now.
Yes.
Everyone wanted him, but we persuaded him to
So
come.
where did you lure him
Actually,
from?
well, we had been
From
reading.
Zurich.
We had
From
been
Zurich.
reading and studying his books for years, actually, and so we had the first archetypal conference in the U.S. when James was leaving Switzerland, and so it drew a lot of interest from all over the country.
All over the world.
Wow.
Really.
James had received a grant from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund.
Wow.
And when he came to Dallas, he was so enamored with Dallas, the city Dallas, and he called it Aphrodite's city. He just thought the way we live and the way we...
Now, did we tell him how he was living? Did we dare tell? We had, actually, he stayed at my mother's house.
That's right.
She was away, and so we introduced him to the house, which is now the house of John and Jennifer Eagle, that had been built by Edward Stone. And he thought, oh, everybody lives like this. And he swam in the pool. And
That's the one with the dining room over the swimming
Oh,
pool.
how wonderful.
And so he thought that we were quite wonderful here.
So we lured James Hillman to Dallas,
Right.
and he joined Robert Sardello, who was the head of the psychology department, and also Robert was head of the graduate program in psychology at the University of Dallas. And James Hillman said he came because of Robert's work, because he admired his work so very much. So James Hillman was with us. Robert Sardello was doing really unusual new work in phenomenological psychology, and also a new psychology called cultural psychology, which is what we feel we initiated
Yes, we
when
did,
we
really.
started at the Dallas Institute. So Donald and Louise Cowan, James Hillman, Robert Sardello, Joanne and I were the six, we say the six founding fellows of the Dallas Institute.
And you all brought something very different to the
Very
table.
different.
And your experience is in civic planning, city development, and for you, literature, publications. There's Robert, was he spiritual psychology? And
yes,
James
it was fun. He started out as a phenomenological psychologist from Duquesne.
Right.
And then it moved into cultural psychology. James Hillman was archetypal psychology. These are all big names.
Yes.
These are all names, and actually all those distinctions have broken down in the psychological field. Now they all sort of interweave with one another, but at the time they were separate. But James always said that his whole direction changed by being involved with the Dallas Institute, because he became really interested in the city and the polis and how one could improve and enliven the life in the city.
For example, I invited James to speak to the city council, and when our Dallas City Hall first opened, the one designed by I.M. Pei,
right.
We arranged for James to speak to the city council and to a larger public group. And Louise Cowan also spoke to that same group. And that's quite unusual and that began the talk about how we care for the soul of the city.
Right.
And those beginning years, that was 1982. And actually, that was earlier, it was 1978. And so it was remarkable work and very unusual, unheard of for this kind of language.
And how was it received at the time?
Oh, I think they rolled their eyes a lot.
Yes, what are all of these gray hairs doing over there?
And Joanne would talk about the work of Gaston Bachelard, you know, and they couldn't pronounce the name. But we felt in those days such, we were all so intense about what was happening in our culture. And so imagine 1978 on, realizing that an enormous shift is coming culturally, and knowing that we simply weren't talking about it, weren't prepared for it. And we all know what that shift was, you know, after World War II, and then the huge economic explosion of sprawl all over cities. Language changed. We felt we were losing our language. And the way to regain it was to study the great epic works of literature. And then to be concerned about the human being in the city. And that's where the psychology came in. So these were our concerns early on. And we were just passionate about wanting to have a place downtown. And so then we found our wonderful house on Ruth Street. And
that is a true gem, isn't it?
It is a gem.
Really?
It is.
But at the time, though, from what I gathered, that house Ruth Street wasn't a wonderful part of town.
My mother was worried about me coming down at nighttime. She thought someone might hit me over the head or something. It has certainly changed since then. Now we feel like it's a very central part of the city, and it now has so many marvelous layers of classes, and both in the Teachers Institute and in the general sort of public, that now it feels good to be there. And
it does.
I think that adds to the appeal. I mean, learning is appealing per se, but you always want to make the environment conducive, I mean, to be exciting and wonderful.
Well, I think you walk into that property and just have a sense of calm that flows over you. There is something, there's little nooks and crannies that you can go to retreat, to read, and it's there's nowhere really else like that. That it's focused 100% on nourishing your mind and your soul, and where can you go to be nourished like that?
I know. Well, it has achieved what we had such a desire to achieve, and that I remember when we found that old house, we had to rent it for 2 years, and signed a lease just for the front half. I remember Joanne and I went down to the bank and
we did
with
somewhat shakily. And we opened the bank
and gave kind of personal pledges to sign that lease because we had no money. We started it with a gift, actually, from Mary Jane and Frank Ryburn, $25,000, and that was all we had to start.
Wow. Wow.
And then we had to raise the funds. And we already had the faculty, and we had the intention, and we knew what we wanted to do, but we had to start from the very bottom to raise the funds.
And how was it raising the funds? It
was very difficult.
Yes,
because people didn't know what we were
people
talking
didn't know what
about.
And, you know, Henry Beck, who was one of our early chairmen of the board, kept saying, you know, I really like the Institute, but could you just give me 2 sentences to describe what we're doing here?
So we laminated it on
finally did.
a card, and he carried it around in his billfold.
Because it was and is unique. I mean, it's not quite like any other institution that we can point to. And that's why I think it's so very much needed. When we first formed the Institute, we were trying to figure out what to call it. And when we called it the Dallas Institute for Humanities and Culture, we thought that maybe culture was a word that people would misunderstand. Mm-hmm. Actually, we found out that humanities maybe is the word we've had to defend more than culture.
Interesting.
We considered the Dallas Institute of Imagination and Culture, but we felt that was just too airy for most people to get their their thought around. And so we did use humanities, but we wanted to distinguish it from humanism. And so all of those little nuances, now we don't even think about it.
Yes.
And I love the name because science and economics now have dominated our thinking and our culture, our television. And all of the areas of the humanities are always second thought, or they're diminished. You know, they're not funded the way science, math, and economics are funded. So there's certainly a need continuing to talk about how we live, why we live the way we live, the foods we eat, you know, the way we drive down the street. Should we have one-way streets, you know, because you go faster on a one-way street and you can't get to where you want to go. All of these cultural nuances that create the very world we live in and make us feel good in our world are not so good.
Right. And you're absolutely right. It's bringing the humanity into life. Mm-hmm. And that's...
It is. And, you know, we hear so often today, I mean, you hear students say, well, I really would like to study literature, but I feel like I have to do something that opens up a career, without realizing that the fundamental essence of literature and of the classics is just what has made Western civilization what it is. And now it feels like it, you know, may need a little bit of support and understanding of what it does mean. So we really feel that our classes and our Teachers Institute is invigorating that the importance of language, thought, and imagination as just fundamental to the human spirit.
It is, and I want to touch more upon that when we come back. So we will take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thank you.